Women's History Month this year, the Women's History Month always have a theme. And we always try to match the mathematicians that we speak on to the theme. And so the theme this year is advocates for equity, diversity, and inclusion. That's the theme of Women's History Month this year. And so I chose to speak on the mathematician and politician named Dame Kathleen Ollerenshaw. She was born in 1912, and she just passed away 10 years ago in 2014. So Kathleen was born Kathleen Mary Timpson, and she was born in Withington, Manchester in the UK. Her grandfather was the founder of a fairly large shoe repair company in England at the time, or in Great Britain, Timpson Shoe Repair. And she actually, this is one of the things that she was a advocate for, or a role model for. Kathleen became nearly completely deaf at age of 8. She had otosclerosis, which was genetic. It wasn't affecting her until she got sick, and then the sickness kind of made it come on, and she lost most of her hearing. It's a bone, a genetic deformation of like the bones inside the ear, and she was nearly deaf. She wasn't completely, but for all intents and purposes, she was deaf. She did learn to lip read. At the time, she was born in 1912, and this would have been 1920-ish. They thought that it would be better if she learned to lip read because she was going to be living with mostly hearing people who didn't know sign language, and so they didn't feel like learning sign language would be helpful for her because there really wasn't a deaf community for her to participate in. And so they were hoping that she could function and do well in the hearing world, which she actually did. She gravitated towards math, and she said in her writing later that she gravitated towards math because it didn't require as much much speech interaction as, say, English or other subjects. And she found that she was good at it, and that her hearing loss her deafness didn't affect her ability to learn the math. And she was encouraged by her headmistress at the school that she went to when she was young, called Lady Barnhouse School. Her headmistress had actually studied math at Cambridge. And so she encouraged Kathleen in her mathematical interests. I thought at this time it'd be kind of fun. This is kind of not relegated to her earliest years, but I want to talk about Kathleen more a little bit as a person than just the facts. So she had lots of interests, and one of her biggest interests was sports. She loved sports. She played cricket and lacrosse in high school. She regularly won the 100-meter sprint on sports day at both her elementary school and her high school. She excelled at field hockey and learned ice hockey in her 20s. And she even played both field hockey and ice hockey for her university team, and then ice hockey on club teams in Lancashire County and the north of England in her 20s, after she had actually had her first children. So when she was already a mom, she was playing ice hockey. So she was kind of a fierce lady. She also loved figure skating, ice dancing, mountain climbing, and snow skiing. So you'll see in her autobiography that she wrote when she was 93, one of the photos that she chose was of her her snow skiing, which I thought was kind of interesting. That out of all the things that she'd done in her whole life to put on the front of her autobiography, she chose her snow skiing. So it must have been one of her, happiest memories or favorite pictures or something. Interestingly enough, she met her husband, Robert, during elementary school when they were both 5 years old. So her and her husband knew each other from kindergarten for the rest of their lives. Kathleen went to high school, at a very prestigious all-girls boarding school in Scotland. She went there from the ages of like 13 to 17, and when she got there, she was so far ahead of the other students in math that she was like, I'll put aside the math for a little bit and I'll focus on some other things. So her first 2 years, she focused on other subjects. But then when she got to the point where she was ready to pick up her studies again, they said, well, you can't take math because you didn't take math your first 2 years. You're not going to be able to do these classes. And she threw such a fit and she threatened to leave the school. And they finally agreed to, well, we'll let you try it for 1 semester. Well, of course, she was so talented at math that once she got a chance to show them that she could handle it, then they let her stay in. So I think in England it's called sixth form. So she studied math extensively through her sixth form, which would be like our junior and senior years. Partially because of that and partially because of her experiences at university, she became later in life quite an advocate for, a really staunch advocate for equality and education for girls. Two books that she wrote, and again, remember she was born in 1912, so this would have been, she would have been late 30s into her 40s when she wrote these 2 books. Education for Girls and Girls' School. She wrote in 1961 and 1967. While she was in high school, she kept in touch with Robert through letters, so they kept connected. And she applied to Cambridge, which Cambridge actually had and still has, I'm pretty sure, a better reputation in mathematics. But Robert had already started school at Oxford University to become a doctor. And Cambridge didn't have the program that he needed. And Oxford still had a good reputation in mathematics, just not quite as good as Cambridge. So she decided to go to Oxford instead. So after she went to Oxford, or when she decided she was going to go to Oxford, right after high school, she actually decided to take kind of a year off. I mean, I guess kind of like a gap year, but it wasn't. I mean, she did some education or some scholarly things during that year. She went to the University of Manchester, and she studied higher algebra and geometry at University of Manchester. And actually the person who was her, I wish I would have put his name on the slide, but I didn't. The person who she was under or worked with then was kind of a lifelong friend and somebody who supported her and she worked with for years to come. She almost didn't get accepted into Oxford. Her first interview at Oxford, when she was done, she had kind of missed a few things because she was trying to lip read. And she missed a few things, and they thought she hadn't done fantastically. And she said, well, I'm deaf. And they were like, no, you certainly can't be accepted to Oxford. You're never going to be able to succeed if you're deaf. And so they did allow her to go on to her second interview. And in the second interview, they asked her questions that were easier for her to catch the questions and to figure out what they were asking her. And she performed better, and she never told them she was deaf. And she never, until after she was accepted and she was in classes, then she let her professors know she was deaf. But, sad times that they basically were saying, you might not be able to do this because of your disability. So she earned an equivalent of a bachelor's degree in 1933, and her and Richard got married in 1939. Richard actually had become a doctor, became a distinguished military doctor, and a medical illustrator. He was a fairly renowned medical illustrator of medical books. They had a son in 1941 named Charles and a daughter in 1946 named Florence. And she continued her studies. There was a break in there, but she continued her studies and graduated in 1949 with her PhD in mathematics. Her focus was on critical lattices, which is kind of pretty higher level math. I decided to not try to explain what that is because I, for one thing, don't really understand it real well myself. So, but it's pretty high level. And it's a kind of a geography kind of based mathematics. Did I say geography? Yes. Geometry, not geography. It's a geometry-based math. And she actually wrote, during her graduate work, wrote 5 original mathematical research papers on the topic that were published. So early in her career, within when she left Oxford the first time after getting her bachelor's degree, she just did some various things. Remember, she was, Kathleen liked to do things. She liked to travel. She didn't spend every minute of her life doing mathematics. So she kind of played around a little bit after university. If I remember correctly, that was the time she took some time off to travel and learn to ski and things like that. But in 1936, she actually did some secretarial work for a time so that her sister could keep her job while she was having a baby. So Kathleen hadn't had her baby yet, but her sister was having a baby, and so she agreed to take her sister's job so her sister didn't lose her job while she had her baby. So apparently she was very close to her sister. She started to work for the Shirley Institute, which was formerly known as the British Cotton Industry Research Association, on a temporary basis. And for that work, again, very mathematically gifted, she taught herself statistical efficiency techniques to analyze the methods and the ingredients in the cotton weaving that they were doing. And so she figured out and applied that statistical efficiency techniques and advanced algebra, and told the company how they could reduce this thing that took them 6 days to do down to 6 hours. So they were pretty happy about that, and they offered her a permanent position. So again, 6 days to 6 hours. So, less than 1/6 of the time, which is just crazy. I'd love to try to find it. I tried to find out a little bit about what it was, but I couldn't figure it out. So she was offered a permanent position, and the permanent position, they asked her to design canvas that was waterproof. So to help with she wasn't making the canvas, but she was doing the statistics and the research on what was working and what wasn't working. And she did that until the start of the war. At the start of the war, she actually moved back in with her parents because her and her family were afraid that, do we have people trying to get in? Her family were afraid that she had her children or her child, and they were afraid she wouldn't hear the air raid sirens, which she wouldn't have heard the air raid sirens. So she moved in with family so that she would have that protection for her and her son. After the war, and her husband was also off fighting in the war, so he was deployed and not at home. After the war, she was a mother, a caregiver, and a part-time lecturer at Manchester University again. Like I said, she had that connection to Manchester University throughout most of her life. In 1949, Kathleen was given one of the first hearing aids that were ever developed. It said in the information that I read that they were clunky, they were not comfortable, but they did allow her to hear for the first time since she was 8 years old. Her already busy, productive life, she ramped it up even more. She became a member of the governing body of St. Leonard's School. That's where she went to high school at. And she was a representative this was like a national organization, the governing bodies of girls' public schools. So she was the St. Leonard's representative on that governing body. She also was a member of the National Council of Women and the Manchester Education Committee. And her first elected position, she was elected to the Manchester City Council. After Kathleen became able to hear with her hearing aids, she fell in love with music. She, again, hadn't really heard music since she was 8 years old, and she fell in love with music. And she actually helped found create the Royal Northern College of Music, which is still it's still very active and very much alive today. She was elected the chairman of the Manchester Education Committee. Then she was elected to the British Association of Commercial and Industrial Education Council. And for that last position, she actually traveled the world to USSR, Japan, and USA to learn about education in other countries and bring back her findings and what she knew from her travels to help guide decisions with the education in Great Britain. At that point, for a time, she became a politician. She was mostly focused on her political appointments and elected positions. She was appointed actually Dame Commander of the British Empire for services to education in 1970, which would be like the Secretary of Education, equivalent to in the United States. And then she was elected Lord Mayor of Manchester in 1975. Mayor of Manchester, that's, from what I can gather, that sounds like it's the mayor of like a city, but from what I gather, it's more like a governor. Okay, it's not just a single city, I don't think. Again, I was having a little hard time finding that. But she wrote books called First Citizen and the Lord Mayor's Party. The Lord Mayor's Party is actually a children's book. So she wrote a children's book about politicians. She began her work at that time on magic squares and published the first general solution to the Rubik's Cube. So magic squares she actually started working on at the request of an acquaintance. So someone had asked a mathematical acquaintance of hers to work on this because he needed it for his for printing, for a thing that he was doing, and he needed this information on these magic squares. That mathematician couldn't figure it out, so they asked her to look at it. She worked on it for a year, and after a year had enough information to publish her most famous piece of work, which is constructing and enumerating most perfect pandiagonal magic squares, which sounds like it's just kind of a math game, but it was actually very useful for many applications. So back to the Rubik's Square, though. She was so enthralled with the Rubik's Cube that she ended up being the first one to publish a general solutions for the Rubik's Cube. So she published it in a mathematical publication. But she played with it so much she hurt her thumb and had to have surgery. So she hurt the pad of her thumb from flipping the Rubik's Cube, which I thought was kind of funny. No, that's good. So what is a magic square? So this is her book that she published. It's probably what she's the most well-known for mathematically because it was quite a breakthrough. And that's her working on a magic square. It's kind of one of those glass, where they let you write on the glass, take a picture from the other side. But a pan-diagonal magic square. So a magic square is a square where the rows, the columns, and the diagonals all add up to the same number. Add on to that magic square the pan-diagonals adding up to that same number, and then you have a most perfect pan-diagonal magic square. So what does that mean? Well, if you see like the rows and the columns and the diagonals all add up. So like 18, 9, 2, 21, 15 adds up to 65. All the rows add up to 65, all the diagonals. But if you go 2, 11, 10, and then you've run out, you need 2 more numbers because you're supposed to have 5 numbers. So you drop down to the diagonal that has 2 down below, and you put it kind of up at the top and take that 23 and 19 and put it up at top. Those add up to 65 also. So that's a pan-diagonal magic square. It's still a magic square, but it also has that additional feature. So Dame Kathleen became a truly well-known and beloved figure in Great Britain. For her mathematics, she was very highly regarded for that, but she was also highly regarded as a politician, as an advocate for women, for people with disabilities, and anybody in education, especially higher education in England, would know the name Kathleen Ollerenshaw. Very, very beloved character figure in Great Britain. And one of the nice things is she lived to 102 years old. So she had a very long, active life and very many friends, very close to her family, and contributed to a lot of public service and education things. So that's it.